Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Kason Morris Learnings. I'm Kason Morris, and on our show, we talk about everything related to life, work, and legacy. I'm joined by my co host and background producer, Chris Fernandez from Alive Studios. How's it going, Chris?
Doing well, man. Can't complain. Happy weekend. Girlfriend just turned 30 as well, so now we're both 30. Things are going well. Can't complain.
Nice, nice. Celebrating birthdays are super exciting. Had my friend also had a birthday this weekend as well, local friend out here. So he's still in his 30s, working his way to that big 4-0. So appreciating all that. All right, cool. So for everybody who doesn't know me, let's get into a little bit of a snapshot. Again, Kason Morris. I'm a Fortune 100 learning executive. I'm also a certified life and career design coach. I spent the last 15 years just doing everything related to helping empower people do more. Born and raised in the Bronx, total skills nerd, all about people power, people improvement, and that's allowed me to do a lot for myself and taking on these ideas of life designing and career crafting and legacy building. I've been able to build myself 10 strategic promotions and redesign my career going on 7 times across 5 different industries, all while managing businesses outside of my 9 to 5 executive work. So with that in mind, the model, the tag, design for life, the way I break down my journey in achieving everything that I've achieved is the idea that you focus on 3 big areas. So you focus on the idea of your life, and that's what you love and ultimately live for. Your work, which is what you can do to get paid and make an earning wage, and your legacy, which is what do you leave behind for yourself and others. And that's what we talk about on Kason Morris Learnings. We're gonna go through these 3 big pillars, and this week we have been talking about the pillar of life. And ultimately, with the pillar of life, the goal is to create synergy. That's the aim, and we break that out down into 3 areas. The first week we talked about health. Last week we talked about love, and this week I'm going to give you game on how I approach and think about the idea of play and how it's really important to designing your best life and work. And as I always say in each of these sessions, it's always important to start where you are. Okay is better than perfect, and we're going to start from where you are right now and move you forward with this idea of play. So let me ask a question. Chris, feel free to chime in. Anyone who's on LinkedIn or YouTube can also chime in. It's how do you define play? Like, how do you define play for yourself? I have a point of view, but I would love to hear from anyone in our audience. And also, Chris, if you have a point of view, definitely chime in.
Hmm. How do I define play? Um, hmm. I guess it's I don't know. In relation to life, I guess it would be like the things you do in your downtime, the things you do that like it sucks because like we always say like things that maintain you as a human, but it's just like work should also be maintaining you as a human. It's like we have this disassociation where it's like you have to be a different person in work than you have to be in real life. um so I don't know. I think there's a common definition of how people define play, but I think we also live in a world where the idea of the definition of play is changing
Yeah,
as we get older, and it's just like people are trying to enjoy more of the things that they don't consider play. Like we have such a positive connection with the word play and
yeah.
such a negative word with the word work. And I feel like we're trying to like combine those as we move forward and trying to like get the most out of what we do for a living and get that purpose filled work that you've always been talking about in life design. Um, so yeah, it's an interesting topic. For me right now, it's just leisure. It's just like it's the
Yeah.
things you do to stay sane, the things that are not related to work. So for me, it's like Marvel, anime, video games, tech, all those things. So
Nice. I appreciate that definition. And what we're going to do in this episode is just break it down because I think common language is really important. So to your point, like, the way I define play are what are the activities in your life that bring you fun and joy? And to the point that you mentioned, like, why is it so important in life design? I mean, at the end of the day, it's an essential part of human experience. It's essential to our well being and happiness, and play is a multiplier of our well being and happiness. And what I find is that most people associate play with children. And the thing that I want to reframe and reimagine today, to your point, is how can we re-engage with play as adults?
Hmm.
So there really are three objectives I want to hit on today. So it's like the idea of helping you to assess your current level of play and fun in your life right now, to making sure that you can identify areas that you want to actually work on play a little bit more. And I'm going to give you some definitions and ways to think about that. And then last but not least is like, how can you start to develop a plan to incorporate more play and fun in your life? And Chris, did I cut you off? Were you going to pop in and say something?
Oh, no, no, no! I was just gonna say, Candice Minuyo had wrote, for her, play is time spent having what you define as fun. So yeah, just wanted to
Nice, nice. We're
get some engagement in there.
awesome. We're definitely on the same page. So for everyone's awareness, I like to define play, and this is based on good research, into five types of play when you think about it in an adult context. So the first type of play is physical play. So what do I mean by that? That is play in the form of activities where you're using, your physicality, like tug of war, capture the flag, kickball, dodgeball. It sounds a little old school, but it's just a bit of like the rough and tumble kind of movement. And the reason why this area of play is so powerful is because it also helps with like emotional regulation and our cognitive, emotional regulation, and also physical mastery. So physical play, that's the first one I want you all to think about as we go through the other four types. So the next one is what I would describe as ritual play. So the way I frame and think about ritual play is it's activities that tend to have a set of rules and more structure to them. So that can be sports that can combine with physical, but I think of like chess, board games, sports activities that have structure. Because with ritual play, the goal here is it allows us to create, it allows us to strategize, it allows us to design and engage in activities that bring people together for like a common purpose. So that's the real caveat around ritual play. So I think of sports teams like playing basketball, football. America has a huge American football culture. Internationally, football, aka soccer, that's a form of both combining physical play and ritual play because it's all about the rules and the teaming and bringing folks together for a common purpose, which is to win. So the next play I wanted to outline was the idea of fantasy play. So when you think of fantasy play, this is what allows you to live out your fantasies, for lack of better wording, and let your imagination run wild. So some examples of that can include coloring, telling stories, painting, crafting, even acting. And Chris and I we were having a sort of behind the scenes conversation about some of our favorite actors. Chris even mentioned some work he was doing recently with a comedy series, if you will, and that's actually to me an example of fantasy play because the comedian is telling stories and they're improving, and the goal of the comedian is to foster your imagination to make you laugh.
Yeah, no, I agree. My bad. I was just showing. I was nodding. Yeah.
So I was just trying to provide a good example of how you can interpret fantasy play. So then the last one I wanted to call out specifically was the idea of body play. And the reason why I'm creating this nuance, because you say, hey, Kason, you already said physical play, but when I think about body play, it's really about within you. So it's like, the desire to get yourself out in the world, or to work on yourself. So I think of things like yoga, and I think about being in nature and hiking and mountain climbing, and things that are really contained within you that may have a physical element, but it usually relates to like nature and using your body to achieve a goal. So those are examples of body play, and that's why I wanted to create the distinction between purely physical play, because you could be running around, and it doesn't, like, physical play. I think is a little more unstructured and more spontaneous, whereas I feel body play is more introspective and reflective. So again, just my take. But what I wanted to do with this whole area is really start to break down these different facets for you of different types of play. So last but not least is the idea of object play. So this is the type of play where you're manipulating objects. So this is like building and designing. So I think of activities like playing Jenga or Legos. How many adults are huge, grown up kids with Legos? I have tons of Legos. I have a Lego Infinity Gauntlet right behind me. Um, I have a huge, what did my wife get me? A Black Panther Lego set that I have to build that's over 4,000 pieces.
I'm gonna
But
zoom in on these things real quick.
you're trying to see all
Just
the
calling
stuff.
you out real quick. Oh man.
all my elements and examples of play. That's hilarious. So it could even less than like Legos, it's like building a fortress, snowball fight. Like, these are things that to me all fit in that idea of object play. Like, it's like building and constructing something and using your hands to create some kind of either thing or an idea. So now that we've covered the 5 types of play, and hopefully this is a very, interesting exercise and educational piece for you all, what I wanted to do was go into how do you go about assessing your play space. If you checked out the other episodes, this is a dashboard that I use, in a dashboard model that I'll continue to use to introduce you guys to the top level concepts. And really, the goal of this dashboard is not about achieving balance, but just to sort of rank and rate where you are. It's a diagram to kind of see, like, hey, where am I in these facets of my life? And first we did it in relation to health. Last week we did it in relation to our sense of love, and now this is how we're breaking it down to our sense of play. So the way the dashboard works is you just outline the different criterion you have. In this case, I have, 5 elements going from physical, ritual, fantasy, body, and object. And then you go from 0, which is the far left, meaning you're empty, to 5, which is the far right, meaning you're pretty full in those activities. So for those of you that are online, I would love for you to just take a moment, and even though you may not have this physical asset, just give yourself a ranking. Now that we've talked about the definitions of the different types of play, and you don't have to use 5, you can use whatever's relevant for you. But I like to use the idea of the 5 because I really want to break it down and provide value to you all. Um, so, Chris, before I go into my own ranking on these factors, I would love to I would love to hear from either you or the audience around these ideas. Like, how do you think about that breakdown of how I kind of expanded on it? Because, like you said earlier, play is usually, I think, balled up into like one core idea.
Yeah. So I find the breakdown interesting. I'm still like trying to wrap my head around the differences between a few of them, and I guess it's in regards to physical, body, and
Hmm.
and object. And really the physical to ritual one, like when you complain that when you explain that one from the difference of like it's the idea of like just going for a run versus like the idea of running up to a mountaintop every day. You get me? Like there's a is that the discern difference between those 2?
Yeah, I would say there are nuances, and to that point, they're not mutually exclusive.
Mhm.
The reason why I break it down that way is because, sometimes we have different types of play that speak to us in
Mhm.
different ways. And versus trying to like boil the ocean, I tried to expand. My intention is to expand language around how to think about different types of play and what may drive you a little bit more.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's totally up for like conversation. It's not a, exact science. It actually is based on research. And I think it's a good way for us as adults to think about, the construct of play in a more adult way, and
Yeah.
and deconstruct it a little bit.
Yeah, I think when I see the word ritual, I think I start to think along the lines of like habits, like
Mhm.
what are your habits, like what are your habitual things that you're doing to play. Um, as I look at this and like try to like internally fill this out for myself, I'm lacking in a lot of areas. I think the one where I'm like excelling the most is definitely like in terms of like object play, in terms of like uh, I get a chance to like solve a lot of big problems based on what I do for a living. So I
Yep.
think that there are lots of times where I consider the work that I do as like a form of object play, where I get to put these ideas together, come up with solutions, try to make shows engaging and more informative, and how can I balance that fine line of edutainment. So yeah.
And I think you offered a lot of interesting context, and even from the beginning of this particular episode, I the reason why I share this information is like you can inject your work and your activities with different forms of play, to create more well-being in that way. And to the point of this dashboarding exercise, and I love the feedback you offered, Chris, is a gauge. Like where am I? Like, wow, I thought I was pretty okay with play, but I can see room and opportunity for improvements in things that matter to you. So that's why I wanted to kind of go into sort of my sort of ranking. So to your point, it very much ebbs and flows based on this breakdown. And to the point you also made earlier, to me, there's some overlap in some of these ideas. So the reason why I ranked sort of physical and body for me as a 3 is because I find my going to the gym and my regular workout routines a form of play, but it also has structure to it. So it has structure in the sense that I have workouts that I go through, within an hour, and a cadence between strength training and metabolic training. But then I also do it in a community. So, but where I see opportunity is, and I laid this out for myself, is I want to do other types of body related play. So focusing more on yoga and other types of activities that involve nature to improve that element for me.
Yeah, I was
Um,
gonna ask, like the fact that you're doing like certain workouts and sets. I was gonna ask, like, would that apply that to also ritual play as well? Being that there is more of a rule set behind there in terms of like you're watching your macros. I don't know if you are, but like you get me like along those lines of it's a science. And people
yeah,
almost kind of gamify the idea of like physical health. So yeah.
Yeah, no, spot on, and that's what I'm saying is like there are some elements that have a ritual construct to it, and then there are elements that you can totally work on. So that's why they're not mutually exclusive. But exactly, like there's a structure, there's a community of practice, there's a time constraint. So those are just different elements that make it more like a ritual, in that sense. So hopefully in going through that dashboarding exercise and talking about, some of the elements that I want to work on, particularly, again, this is not saying that everything should be full, but it's about deconstructing the different ways you're playing, and what you want to work on a little bit more. So for me, my goal is to improve on my object play a little bit more, meaning I want to finish my larger Lego sets, and to work on and to work on my body play a little more.
I
Yeah,
got you.
that Lego set is daunting. I
Which
was
one
like,
you got? What are you working on? What are you building?
It's a Black Panther bust. So it's
Hey,
the full mask with the claws. I
is
bought
it
a
is it one of those like dope ones where like they has like you built the mask and then you like take it off and you got like a Lego version of Chadwick Boseman's face or something like that? That
no,
would be so sick.
you can't put it on. It's more for like display.
Oh, bro, it'd be
Um,
dope if they had like a domino, like some sort of like domino set where you can like hit it and like the dominoes fall apart, similar to how like the nanotech falls off. I don't know, we're getting too deep into it, but
yeah, that's a little bit too sophisticated
yeah.
for the Legos. But one thing I am adding to it though is a lighting set too. So
Oh,
it'll be
I see
very
you.
yeah, it'll be a very, very interesting project. So that's
Will it
my
take over like some space behind you? Or are you just gonna see it on the set design one? Okay, cool.
yeah, when I'm done with it, I will definitely put it in my set in my backdrop as a display. So that'll be fun, and I'll have my daughters help me out with it sparingly because
Dope.
it's pretty complicated. But but to move along with this idea, hopefully you found the dashboarding exercise useful, and also the language and introduction of the different types of play. So really, the goal and the aim at this point is, now that we've talked about the types of play and how to use the dashboard, is you really should start thinking about potential areas where you want to improve. So you know as a result of this exercise, my aim and intention is for you to ask three big questions, and it's, where did you rate yourself lowest? So I'm curious now that Chris added some context, but I don't know if anyone in the audience wants to chime in based on the exercise. Where did they feel they may have been lowest based on the breakdown? If we get anything there, Chris, definitely chime in.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I'll
I'm monitoring. We have some people watching.
Yep,
No engagement just yet, but we'll
no
keep
worries,
asking.
no worries. So that being said, if you're from the point of figuring out where you're your lowest, it's like, well, based on where you feel like you're lowest, what concerns do you have in those areas? Get specific with yourself. Really understand, like, hey, is this something that means something to me? How am I going to essentially then move into the next phase of it, which is like, what are the changes I can make in my work, in my life outside of work, to really invest in moving the needle a little bit on that element of play that's important to you. And from that point, like, now that you've identified the areas that you want to improve, it's very, very important to then, that's when you start actually developing a true plan of action. And you're going to see that in a lot of the things that I share and a lot of the ideas that I share, is going to have a very similar structure and a similar cadence, because it's about reinforcing principles that I know work. They've worked for me personally. They've worked for people that I've coached. They also, work in the corporate work that I'm doing. So,
I'll just raise
so
mine.
yeah, I know, I feel you. So, what does that mean to ultimately develop, your plan? I break it down into 4 actionable steps. People are familiar with SMART goals, but this is sort of the first 3 elements of SMART, if you will. It's trying to make it, specific, measurable, and actionable, and I say achievable in this case. And I also frame it as not about a goal, but more about your intentions, because it's a really an indicator of just thinking about it a little bit more, and what do you intend to improve. And then with that in mind, you take that intention, and then you break that down into smaller, more manageable steps. And the way I characterize it is like, all right, you got to set the bar low. In these areas of play, which is our topic of today, it's like, what are the things that you can do a little bit more of that doesn't take too much effort? So that you can build that muscle memory and make some progress. And that could be an example of like, hey, I'm going to make sure I show up to the Y at least once a week, even if you don't know what you're going to do in relation to your play activity, but you're putting yourself in an environment that will encourage you to likely do more of it and be more consistent. And then last but not least is the idea of setting a realistic timeline. When you're time bound, you tend to achieve more, but also being realistic. So that's why I back into the idea of what is easy. And by easy, I mean achievable consistently, and then how can you time box yourself to actually do it on a regular basis. So when you're able to do that, then that leads to the last step of the 4 actionable steps, which is, identifying resources and support. Because once you've set that bar low and you've given yourself a time scale to make that improvement, it takes a village to do these things. So that's why I share this information. That's why I coach. You may have folks in your own networks and circles that can help you, achieve those aims that you intend to achieve in relation to the topic. So, we're nearing the half past the hour, and this is around the time we wrap up. And really, the goal is to give you a lot of value in 30 minutes. So, what I wanted to do was recap, what we have covered in this session. So, really, again, it was all about presenting you the model, the design for life model that I use, your sort of best life model around around life, around work, and around legacy. We talked about the component of play, which falls within the life pillar. And I described to you the 5 types of play that you may want to think about as you start to benchmark where you currently are. And then we went through the dashboard and talked about how you can assess your play score. And I also shared my play score based on the 5 types of play that we outlined. And then I also shared with you ways to think about how you can move toward improving and planning forward in an actionable and reasonable way. So this is the episode. This is the topic of play for today. And next week, really, really excited. This is where we wrap up the sort of first pillar, because we've covered all 3 buckets. We've covered the idea of health, the idea of love, and the idea of play. And next week, we're going to highlight all the key takeaways from those sessions if you haven't seen it, and invite a guest to talk about it, a special guest, which we'll share more with you around on our social feeds in the coming week. So that being said, it's a pleasure. This is Kason Morris, and thank you again for tuning in to Kason Morris Learnings, where we talk about everything related to life, work, and legacy. Have a great rest of your day.
Hey, you're forgetting some things, man. You're
What did
forgetting
I
some
forget?
things. You're
What
forgetting
did
some
I forget?
things. Like we
What
got
did
a
I forget?
plug for yourself. If you're interested in working with Kason and like seeing how these learns can be applied to your life, like more than just watching a deck, like follow through with this link right here. Book a call with Kason. Put some time on this man's schedule. It's like watching this can be a first step, but really like booking that call may be the next step to like leading you to actionable items and changing
See,
things.
and
I'm over here
and this
talking from the background. I'm showing my
No, you
face.
do that. This is why I have a co-host. We're building the plane while we're flying it. This is not a pitch for anything. I'm just sharing what I know to be helpful. So, Chris, thank you for that reminder that, I'm happy to network, to have
Third time's a charm.
conversations, to be to be
We
helpful
gotta, I
to
gotta, I gotta
to be
make this
helpful to
more
everyone.
spicy.
You are hilarious.
We can have fun with
Um,
it.
and that being said, Chris, thank you again for your attention, for setting up this environment to have these conversations, and shameless plug for you, for anyone who's interested in putting together live shows like this. You can holler at Chris Fernandez and his Alive Studio team. They do all kinds of great stuff. They do live in person shows. We're doing this remotely. We're actually, on opposite sides of the country right now.
Yep.
All about putting together a great experience for you
And
all.
still
So
find time to play. You know what I mean? All right,
nice.
guys.
All right,
Take
guys.
care.
Well, have a great rest of your day.
All right. Bye, everybody.